Hello peoples and popples, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Fiction&Flora. You can call me Flora. And today we're just gonna talk. We're gonna hang out for a little bit. So I am filming a video just to do a question, no response about what exactly is an unlikable character. I have no answers for you. I don't think there's gonna be any answers at the end of this video either. This is just me thinking aloud and trying to figure out what exactly constitutes an unlikable character and posing some questions, and maybe someone can answer for me. And if you can't, it's fine. I've lived this long without this answer, so I think I'll be fine continuing on without. But the reason this popped up today is because, one, I needed a video to post, and I'm in the middle of a vlog, so I was like, oh, you know, I wanted to post something, and this has been on my mind for a while. The other reason is because, again, this has been on my mind for a while because I keep seeing reviews and videos and threads on Twitter talking about unlikable main characters, whether it be positive or negative. Some people really like unlikable main characters. Some people like books despite an unlikable main character, and some people hate unlikable main characters. But they never describe, or if they do, they don't I'm not reading those reviews, which doesn't mean they don't exist, it just means I'm not seeing them. But like, very rarely do they describe what they mean by an unlikable main character. Like, what people do and do not like are, one, heavily based on cultural context and all the things that come with it, especially in the US, where we have like messy, intercultural relationships. So like what our likes and dislikes are heavily influenced by our culture and our society as a greater whole. There are many factors in there, so it's kind of subjective. Like, what I dislike in a character is not necessarily going to be what the greater society dislikes in a main character or in any character. So therefore, how are we to, like, what is the consensus on a unlikable main character? I looked up, I tried to find the definition for an unlikable main character, and the one I found was basically just like a character that the audience doesn't like. Do you mean like a character that the targeted audience is not supposed to like? Because again, what does that mean? And so these are the questions I have. And this isn't gonna be a very long video, I don't think, but you know, it's just, I just have thoughts. One of which is, like, who decides what is and is not an unlikable? Who decides what characters are likable? Do I? Like, is each person deciding? But like, when people put it in a review, even without describing what makes a character unlikable to them, other people seem to understand what they're saying. Other people seem to get it. So it feels like there has to be a consensus somewhere about what is and is not an unlikable main character. But like, where is that consensus? I want to know. I would like to be a part of the people who understand. I want to be able to see that description and like immediately know what people are saying, but I can't, because my brain just says, well, that's also subjective. What did you dislike about them? What makes them unlikable? Because my next question is, does me disliking a character make them an unlikable character? I don't think so, because again, I think that everyone's tolerances for what is and is not likable is very subjective. And me personally, what I find unlikable usually has to do with how people treat their friends. It usually has to do with people's relationships with others. It tends to have to do with consistency on their part. I don't like inconsistent characters. I don't like characters whose mouth says one thing, their action says another thing, and the narrative tells me a different thing. I don't like those kinds of characters. So, but like, that doesn't necessarily mean they are unlikable to the greater society. That doesn't mean they're unlikable to every person who is in the audience who reads that book. It also doesn't mean that they are an unlikable character to even people who are in the target audience, or even people who read similar to me. So that's not a great descriptor, you know? And I don't know if there ever will be a 100% consensus on what is an unlikable main character. I think it has to do heavily with like genre acceptability. So like, what is accepted in different genres, you know? So like, if I'm looking at a bully romance or a dark romance, I don't read romance, but if I was looking at those two, and and we had like a male protagonist who was being a bully or being really mean or did some horrible stuff, technically that is an unlikable character, but that is an acceptable character for that genre, you know? Like, you are a bully in a bully romance makes sense. Therefore, the idea of them being unlikable in that sense, I mean, technically you don't like them, but that's the point of their character, you know? And that's usually not what people are using when they're describing an unlikable character. People sometimes don't like kids and they call the kids unlikable characters, but like, adults writing children is hard. I don't think a lot of people have mastered that, so fair. I think it's not a well-written child, especially in like horror. They tend to make the kids much more annoying than actual children are in real life, so fair. But you know what I'm saying is, it's just so subjective based on the audience, but also on the genre norms, like what is acceptable within a genre or subgenre. So, you know, like if I am reading a cozy mystery, I will accept that the character kind of does the same thing over and over again, which is insert themselves into criminal investigations, probably ruining the chain of custody when it comes to evidence, probably ruining evidence in general, probably like making themselves a target. I will accept that because it's a cozy mystery. But if I was reading like an actual detective novel where this is a trained detective who's supposed to have years of experience, I would not accept that. You know, those are two, the genre acceptability is separate, and it's very unlikable in a trained detective whose job it is to do an investigation and to know the chain of evidence and to be able to like interact with suspects and victims in like, that's different from, you know, the baker down the street who ends up in a quinky dink. You know, so my acceptance of what is not an unlikable character heavily depends on genre accept like tropes, as well as my own personal preferences for characters, and I assume everybody else's does as well. So so it feels weird when I see a description that's like, oh, you're not gonna like this if you don't like unlikable main characters. Well, what the fuck do you mean? What about this character is unlikable? Are they really vicious towards the people around them? Like, are they immoral? Which, you know, morally gray is booktube's bread and butter. So like, is it their morals that you're telling me I'm not gonna like? Is it the fact that they're like, what about them makes them unlikable? Because like, I in real life don't like billionaires. I'll accept a fictional one though. That's fine. So are you telling me I'm not gonna like this book because there's a billionaire in it? Well, that's not gonna work out. So what is an unlikable main character? The other reason it popped up in my head is because I keep seeing different threads and stuff that talk about people's reactions to unlikable characters. And there are a few trains of thought that I see pop up here and there. I don't feel strongly towards any of them, but I see a few of them. One of which is, if a unlikable main character has trauma, then if you don't like them, you are being unfair to them and their trauma. Which has its, there's something there. Like, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm not saying it's right, it's just, it is. These are different interpretations. But I feel like it's more along the lines of what people are the trauma response is what people tend to have issues with. And by this I mean, if a character has endured a lot of trauma, and their trauma response, their response to that trauma is to treat people in their lives really badly because they are afraid of being hurt again, so they push people away. While it is understandable why this character is acting this way, it is also understandable why someone who is reading this may not want to read this or may not like that character, because just because you understand someone's actions doesn't mean you condone them or want to read about them, you know? Like, put it into perspective, if the person reading it also has their own trauma to deal with, if they also have been, you know, in the position where they are the ones being pushed away and being harmed, be it with words or physical force or emotionally or mentally, and then they have to read this from the perspective of the person who is doing something that they've, like, it is reasonable that they're going to, one, dislike this character, and two, just dip out of that book. So I think there's more nuance to, oh, you don't like trauma, or you don't like realistic trauma responses, therefore your opinion on this character doesn't count. I think there's more to it than that. Because again, like I said, understanding is not the same as accepting, or understanding is not the same as wanting to deal with it, you know? And then there's this train of thought where if you don't like unlikable characters, or if you actively dislike unlikable characters, and that ruins a book for you, then you're being childish. I don't know if this is a particularly popular one. Like I said, I see it pop up on Twitter every once in a while. It'll just flutter by and I'll be like, okay. I don't interact with things that I'm just like, okay, you have your opinions. But you see it happen. You see people say that you are childish or immature or unable to think critically if you dislike a book because a main character is unlikable. And I think that, again, lacking nuance, which it's Twitter, so but I think it's lacking nuance because I am someone who relies on characters to enjoy a book. Not all the time, because, you know, I read a lot of books where it's mostly theme. But if characters are like a key component of a story and I hate the character I'm following, then yes, I'm probably gonna hate this book, because the book is the character. The character and the book are so intertwined that there's no way to enjoy one without the other. So yeah, I'm gonna hate it. Now, if the book is mostly vibes and the character just happens to be there, that's different. Or, like, again, it feels very unnuanced to say that if you don't like unlikable characters, whatever that may mean, you're immature, or you're unable to critically think, or you are, like, that just feels elitist a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. But it also just feels like you're just not thinking of the different reasons why someone may not like this character. Because again, what if they're character driven? What if they really want to like the story? Because that happens to be a lot. I really want to like something, but the characters in it piss me off. What am I supposed to do? You want me to torture myself? I deserve better. Thank you. Because sometimes you want to like a book, sometimes you really want to like something, but the characters ruin it. And again, because there's no set definition of what makes an unlikable character, does that mean that when I say, oh, the characters ruin it for me, are all the characters unlikable now? Or is it just that I disliked those characters? Questions I'm putting out there. So, you know, I feel like there's nuance there. Because, okay, if you can't read a book where people have conflict or something, I don't think you're immature, but I think you're probably not looking in the right places for books, because there are plenty, I assume there are plenty of like cozy books that don't have a ton of conflict in them, or have very light conflict that doesn't require that you have these kind of characters. So if you deliberately search out a book that you know is going to have conflicts in it that you're not going to enjoy, then you should probably like be a little bit more you should probably be looking a little bit farther afield. But it doesn't necessarily make you immature. You might be, but it's not a requirement of the two. And there's also the school of thought where, regardless of why you dislike a unlikable main character, a lot of people connect unlikable main characters specifically to genre. I mean, not genre, to gender. And I see this, again, mostly on Twitter, because Twitter has some of the loudest takes, and I'm not currently on TikTok. And before you pop into my comments talking about, oh, you think you're better because you don't have TikTok, oh, you're pretentious, I don't have TikTok. because I know I will get sucked into TikTok. I know what my personality is. I know that if I open that app, I will live there for the next 8 months. I know who I am. I am trying to protect myself, okay? I don't hate TikTok. I just know I would like it too much, so I don't have it. Now, continue what I was saying. Mostly on Twitter, you see these very surface level interpretations, but they will connect unlikable specifically with gender and very specifically with womanhood, and very specifically cis womanhood, which is something, but we're not gonna get into it. So you will see them connected with cis womanhood, and it's always an interesting argument because it feels like talking to a flat wall. You say you don't like this character, and what you'll see is someone screaming back, oh, you just didn't like this character because they're a strong woman. Oh, you didn't like this character because she's not a fainting daisy. Oh, you didn't like this character because she's blankety blankety blank. And like, sure, some people don't like this character for those reasons. Like, statistically speaking, a decent amount of people who grew up in Western countries, specifically the US, are not gonna like a character because of those reasons. But also, statistically speaking, there's plenty of people who are gonna dislike that character for not those reasons. Like, sometimes a character who happens to be a woman is just annoying. And people who find her annoying aren't bad people, because sometimes that character is just annoying. Sometimes they just have annoying character traits regardless of gender. And what I often see, again, if a man had these characteristics, you would be okay with that. I can't say whether we're right or wrong because, one, I don't look up people's, like, if they dislike this female character and this female character has certain characteristics, I'm not going to look at their book list to find every book they've read, read through them to find, and then read their review to find out if those match up. So, like, you can't say I would give a pass to a man who did the same thing because you don't know. Did I read a book with a man with those characteristics and then give them a pass? If I did that, sure, that makes sense. But otherwise, you're just making broad statements with no basis in reality. Oh, you would let a man get away with it? Are you sure? Are the same people who are reading this book the ones you are talking about when you say they'd let a man get away with it? Are they? Because it feels like probably not. I mean, there's a big chance, but it feels like probably not. And they never make, people never make direct comparisons. They're not like, well, this character did the exact same thing in this specific book and people gave it praise. I don't see it. And if it's happening, I mean, I'm very happy that they're giving they're giving actual comparisons so that they can have a fully fleshed out argument and a nuanced idea of what they're saying. I'm just saying that when you just throw statements out there like that, it really cuts the conversation off before it can get started. Not that you're required to have a conversation. That's just it. That's all I've got. I still don't know what an unlikable main character is. I don't have any strong feelings about unlikable characters because since I don't know what they are, I can't make any broad statements about it. And if you do know, I would love for you to just give me the definition. Let me know. Let me join in with y'all. I want to be there. I want to join the club, please. So like if you have a good like working definition of what an unlikable main character is, drop it down below. And also, like, if you have any feelings towards the different schools of thought when it comes to unlikable characters, such as the specificity of relating an unlikable character to cisgendered women versus, you know, the school of thought where it makes you immature not to like an unlikable character or to have an unlikable character ruin your book, or even the school of thought that has to do with trauma in direct relation to unlikable characters and whether or not you are willing to accept trauma responses. Like, I think all of these have merit, but I also think that because it was on Twitter, there's just not a lot of nuance that can happen there, and I don't think that I am the one to have like spark that conversation, mostly because as someone who doesn't know the definition I don't have the spot. I just want to know, you know. It's just a conversation. Anyway, if you would like to hang out, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. And if you would like to follow any of my reading, sometimes I put full fleshed out book reviews, but more often than not, it's just stars. But if you'd like to just keep up with what I'm doing with myself, you can find me on Storygraph, Goodreads, and Readerly. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.